you very much, and we will start with you, Mr. Minnie. You're up first.
Thank you. Chairperson Baums, thank you for this opportunity to testify before you today and your continued support for full enfranchisement of all residents of the district. My name is Abel Mene, and I am an immigrant. While the council has enacted and fully funded the Local Residents Voting Rights Amendment Act of 2022, it is still a long time before non-citizens like myself will be able to register to vote in DC elections. While we patiently and eagerly await the day when we can cast our ballot in the 2020 elections, as of this day, as of this moment, the Board of Elections website still states that only US citizens can register to vote. Therefore, non-citizens like myself remain disenfranchised. Nonetheless, I remain hopeful that the Board of Elections is working diligently to execute the provisions of this new law. To that end, I urge the board to immediately begin the process of issuing new rulemaking, clarifying the definition of qualified electors to include non-citizens in local elections. As of now, in a mismatch with the DC code, the DCMR currently states, as it has in the past, that a person must be a US citizen in order to register to vote. Director Evans has also indicated that the board has begun the work of hiring a multilingual outreach specialist. This position will be instrumental in ensuring that there is a robust outreach and voter registration program focused on non-citizens. It will be important that the person who fills this position has experience working within the immigrant community in the district. This person must also have experience conducting meetings with simultaneous interpretation in multiple languages. This is so important, I'm going to repeat it. This person must have experience conducting meetings with simultaneous interpretation in multiple languages. While I am a member of the Ethiopian immigrant community and an Amharic speaker, I must urge that if we are only going to have one multilingual outreach specialist, that person must be a proficient speaker of Spanish. Beyond language proficiency, this person must be a community organizer and be able to bring together many community organizations to accomplish the Herculean task of gaining the trust of thousands of people who have been marginalized for decades. Gaining the trust of non-citizens, enough for them to register to vote, will take more than one outreach specialist or even a team of outreach specialists. Beyond that, the district needs to significantly increase its capacity to provide immigrants legal assistance in filing applications for asylum, permanent residence, and citizenship. The city of San Francisco, which recently enfranchised its non-citizens in school board elections, provides free and low-cost immigration legal assistance in several languages to assist non-citizens on a wide range of immigration matters. Just as the Board of Elections must take all precautions to ensure non-citizens face no negative consequences because of their decisions to avail themselves of the right to vote, the council has a responsibility to enact and fund legislation for free legal immigration assistance for those who register to vote. Another area in which the council must take action is by amending the district's laws governing limited purpose driver's licenses, permits, and identification cards. There currently exists a mismatch between the amount of time an immigrant must be a DC resident before they can obtain ID from the DMV when compared to the amount of time they must live in the DC before they are able to vote. The DMV currently only issues IDs to those who have been a resident for 6 months or longer, while a non-citizen could within 30 days become a voting resident registered to vote. Of course, an ID is not necessarily required to register to vote, but a government-issued ID is still the best way for a person to prove they qualify to register to vote. Therefore, it is crucial that the council amends the District of Columbia Traffic Act to allow immigrants to obtain an ID after only 30 days as a resident of DC. In conclusion, I want to return to the Board of Elections. The task before them is only just beginning, and I'm thankful for this opportunity to hear from Director Evans on the agency's preparation to implement this law. I'm hopeful that the director's Testimony will include a clear summary of the ongoing work to ensure the district's voter registration systems are updated as soon as possible to allow non-citizens to vote. Every single day that passes is a missed opportunity to register perhaps hundreds of non-citizens. We cannot waste any time. I hope to hear a clear timeline for when the board expects the voter registration to be ready to accept us as qualified electors. Chairperson Bonds, if there is one question I would like for you to put to the director, it is this: when does the board expect to be ready to allow non-citizens to vote as required by law? Thank you for this opportunity to testify before you. I hope you will ask me some follow-up questions specifically about the need for additional immigration legal assistance and the need to fix the eligibility for limited purpose IDs at the DMV, because I believe these opportunities for the district to provide wraparound services that will assuage any fears potential non-citizen voters will have and make it easier for them to register to vote. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Ms. Brazil?
Good morning. I'm Dorothy Brazil, Executive Director of DC Watch. My testimony today is not written. I would like to make some comments. I have some photos I would like to show, and then I would like to come back and make a closing remark. For more than 20 years, I have monitored political campaigns and elections in the district. In addition, I regularly attend the Board of Elections monthly board meeting, as well as visit and observe voting in 20 to 40 polling sites during an election cycle. Moreover, I've also filed landmark complaints with the DC Board of Elections, the District Court, and the Court of Appeals. For example, our successful challenge in 2002 to the fraudulent signatures on the nominating petitions of then incumbent Mayor Anthony Williams. In recent months, however, I have identified and researched serious problems at the DC Board of Elections, which threaten to impede the agency's ability to properly conduct elections in 2024. For example, since 2020, DC BOE has used a dilapidated, I stress, dilapidated warehouse on V Street Northeast as a vote center where upwards of 60 employees process and tabulate all mailed ballots, which in 2022 totaled 205,000. The warehouse is in such poor condition that at times it has not had working toilets and no potable water. Especially, this is concerning at a time when we were in the midst of the COVID epidemic. As a result, BOE has had to bring in portable toilets and place them just outside the building. In all my years of following district government, I've never known of an agency that had to send its employees outside to the bathroom. In addition, BOE's use of a small, severely restricted area within the remote V Street warehouse as BOE's vote center has also meant that election observers, a critical component of the American electoral process, has been denied access and cannot attest to the accuracy of the vote count. I have a video that has that I'd like to show now. The first 5 pictures on that video were in fact taken at the DC Board of Elections warehouse on V Street during the 2020 election. You've gone too far. You have to back up. Okay. That is the interior of the Board of Elections warehouse in a corner where they are processing the ballots. And the next, you can go to the next 4 photographs. This is a Board of Elections poll worker processing the mailed-in ballots. And if you can see how dark that is. Okay, go to the next. Again, the tables where they have the processing of ballots. And again, the machines where they're feeding the ballots in. In contrast, I want to show this photograph, which is the vote center in Philadelphia. You will see It is brightly lit. There are multiple tables, and poll workers are sufficiently spaced, and they have adequate resources to process the ballot. Now, the next series of photographs is a video from ABC National News, and you have a reporter who went to the Board of Elections warehouse in November of 2020. And again, need to go to the next one. Okay, just let it run for a minute. The reporter, Devin Dwyer, is at the warehouse, and he shows the floor area where the votes are being processed. In front of him is the machine with the ballots being fed into the machine for tabulation. And behind him, in a dark area, you will see, and you have to remember, the cameras with their lights were on, and it's still extremely dark. That is the tabulation of the tabulation machine at the Board of Elections warehouse. If I could just close, thank you. Okay. As I have said in my remarks, I have never known of a situation in which DC employees were being housed in an environment where they could not go to the bathroom. And as I stressed, not have access to potable water to wash their hands, especially when we were in the midst of a COVID epidemic. I would like to submit written testimony to the committee and hope to share it with other council members, community leaders, and elected officials. What is most troubling is the fact that not only does this situation persist, but the multiple efforts by the Board of Elections and the DC Department of General Services not to respond to emails, not to provide the required information. And indeed, in one or two instances, for the chairman of the DC Board of Elections to criticize me and chastise me for sending emails inquiring about the situation. Ms. Bonds, I appreciate your effort today to hold a hearing on this important issue, but this is just the beginning. We need to be prepared for 2024. As you already know, Republicans of Capitol Hill are looking at the District of Columbia in terms of proposing changes to our election process. We need not give them fodder to do this, okay? As I said, I have monitored and observed elections in the district for more than 20 years. This is by far the worst board, the worst Board of Elections staff that I have ever known. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your testimony. We have a few remote witnesses, so I will move to them as well. We'll now hear from Mr. Corey Holman. Good morning, sir. Welcome.
Good morning. Good morning, Councilmember Bonds, Councilmember Fruman, and staff. My name is Corey Holman, a resident of Ward 6. Thanks again for holding this roundtable. In addition to all the issues brought up by the other panelists today, I want to reflect on BOE's reporting of election results in 2022 and urge BOE to ensure that the 2024 election results are reported transparently and correctly to further engender that trust and confidence in our election results that Ms. Brazil referenced is so important these days. But first, I want to stress that I have no doubts about the integrity of the 2022 elections, of course. The district's election administration continues to be a testament to our shared progressive democratic ideals, and BOE and the council and the witnesses should be all commended for the generations of hard work we've put in to get here. In the 2022 general election, however, the board did not succeed at reporting election results. Why? Quite simply, they still are using the old precincts from before redistricting to report results. So that they're not using them for election administration, just for the reporting. So what results from using the old precinct lines to report results? One, the ward level results are still being reported based on the old ward boundaries. So if you go to the website now, The Ward 6 results include votes from Wards 2, the new Wards 2, 6, 7, and 8, and has 90,000 registered voters. And I think as Ms. Bonds or Councilmember Bonds had to go through last year, you know that that is more residents than each ward contains after redistricting. The second, the precinct level results, again, not precincts, just for the reporting level, contain a number of examples where votes are being reported in ANCs that are not in that precinct and never were in that precinct. So in my home precinct 91, there are seemingly randomly 3 votes for an ANC race that is fully outside of my old precinct lines and are being included in the total ANC votes. Again, these are just the reporting issues. And I just want to stress that, again, I'm not questioning the actual results as they're being reported, just want to highlight this shortcoming in reporting. So those are the 2 issues with reporting that I wanted to highlight. There's also a third issue in the timing of how BOE reports results. So just to go through the numbers, by the end of Election Day, BOE reported all early and Election Day in-person votes, as well as mail-in drop-box ballots received before Election Day. It was in the end, that was 80.4% of the total votes, which means 19.6% of votes were either late arriving mail ballots dropped at drop boxes on Election Day, or provisional ballots cast at election centers on Election Day. BOE, to their credit, released the number of ballots left to count after each vote tally. But what they didn't release was where the ballots were being counted from, either by drop box location or reporting precinct. So that meant over the next 4 days, as more votes were added, they weren't added randomly, they were added in geographic patterns. So on Wednesday and Friday after the election, most of the votes were from Wards 1 through 4 and Ward 7. And on Thursday and then the following Tuesday, the votes were mostly from Wards 5, 6, and 8. Again, it's not a huge issue in the final reporting, but what that sort of cycle does is can easily give credence or can raise questions when election, if there ever is a close election, those results could shift each day simply because of how the votes are where the votes are being counted from, and where BOE gives no indication of how many votes are being outstanding from each location. I'd note that I know the last election that was close in Arizona, there was a governor's race, I think, where they were reporting down to the precinct level, the ballots were still left to count. So something like that continues would be super helpful, not necessarily just to report results, but to help continue to engender that trust. So in the end, I just want to urge BOE to do 2 things in this committee to help where they can. One, and I think is vital, is to redraw the precinct lines. Again, I know they're not for voting, but they're just for reporting, but to redraw those reporting precinct lines to align to the new ward boundaries. And that's a simple task that has been done a task that has been done every redistricting cycle before, but was not done this redistricting cycle. And 2, after the in-person early votes are reported by the end of election night, in addition to reporting the number of outstanding ballots, either report the number of ballots left to count that have been received by voting precinct or by the Dropbox ballot location, which again doesn't necessarily align fully to a precinct, but geographically they do cluster. And I want to thank again your oversight of the elections, and look forward to any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your testimony. And we have another remote witness, Mr. Nicholas Schiller.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you now.
All right, great. My name is Nicholas Schiller. I am the Vice President of Mintwood Strategies. And we've worked on multiple ballot initiatives and referendums in the District of Columbia over the last decade. Most recently, the successful Initiative 82. And I'm currently involved with the upcoming ballot initiative, which will open the primaries in the District of Columbia and also allow voters to cast ballots through ranked choice voting. We're still not officially on the ballot yet. We have a lot of work to do, and that's kind of what I want to talk about briefly today. Number 1 is the voter roll. I testified at the Board of Elections monthly hearing last week, and I was given some information saying that the Board of Elections is going to be introducing new regulations in the register this week. But the overarching problem is that's existed for more than a decade in my work is an inflated voter roll. And the inflated voter roll cost taxpayers a lot of money. As you mentioned at the start of this public roundtable, that nearly 87,000 ballots were seen as undeliverable. They came back to the Board of Elections. And that each one of those costs a fair amount of money to mail each time. And that's both the primary and the general. But it also impacts campaigns, because campaigns have to collect 5% of the signatures of registered voters in 5 of the 8 wards. And if we're dealing with an inflated voter roll count, then campaigns are having to spend a considerable amount of more money, both in time reaching voters and also to have an artificially high threshold to achieve ballot access. And I've had some examples over the years in different campaigns where someone knocks on the door of a studio apartment with 6 people registered to vote at that location, and the person that opens the door is not even a registered voter. And it's one of those things that just keeps happening over and over again. And having 87,000 ballots come back is a problem. It was cited during the congressional hearing a couple weeks back that about this, and we need to get to the bottom of it. It needs to be fixed. I mean, for this next campaign, which we will be likely collecting signatures during the 2024 election cycle, having an extra 100,000 registered voters, I anticipate, my guess is there's probably about 100,000 voters that don't belong on the voter roll at all. And I'm not for removing voters arbitrarily. It's that there needs to be a more expedited process to remove those voters that have moved. I mean, I know for a fact that nearly 2% of Ward 2, Councilmember Fruman's ward, are registered to vote at George Washington University addresses and Georgetown addresses, and those people have graduated. I still have a friend of mine from when I went to George Washington University who's registered to vote at a freshman dorm that only has freshman dorms since 1998, and he is registered to vote in Colorado. I called the Colorado election, and he's still on the books now. There's no way for citizens to actually contact the Board of Elections and say, hey, this person has likely moved, this person shouldn't be on the voter roll. There's no way for citizens to engage this process. It's all done outside of our citizen ability. So what we need to do for 2024 is make sure that the number of people that are registered to vote in DC reflects the actual number of registered voters and not an arbitrarily high number. Because right now it's 525,000. No one's been removed this year. And we are well aware that there have been people that have moved, and it should be reduced soon and not starting, it should be finished by the end of this year, because that's what the regulations mandate. Number 2, I'm curious about how non-citizens will be able to sign petitions. Will they have since they'll be treated as regular voters in the District of Columbia, will they be afforded the right to sign petitions to achieve ballot access for campaigns? That's something that I don't have any information about. I'd like more information. Another thing I'd like to bring up are locations within the District of Columbia where petition circulators are unable to engage with voters. For example, the Wharf. The District of Columbia spent about $200 million in that redevelopment, but the streets on there are technically private property. And it needs to be found out whether a person can engage another voter on what's considered private property, even though it's treated as a public-private partnership. I think citizens should be able to engage voters outside of the anthem if they want to, and not be told by private security guards that you can't engage in First Amendment activities here. And then finally, I think there's some savings that can happen for individual precincts. For example, in Ward 1, the Masons building is used as an early vote center. Across the street, there's a public school. That public school doesn't cost the DC government as much money. And there's some savings that could happen. I appreciate your time, and I look forward to the 2024 election cycle. Thank you.
And thank you very much. Thank you to all of our witnesses, our public witnesses. You have a variety of issues, and we will attempt to go through them one by one. Mr. Schiller, let me start with you, because as our last public witness, you mentioned you wanted to determine whether or not non-citizens can sign petitions. And you wanted to make sure that you have a clear understanding of what the rules are related to gathering petitions on private property. And I'm just making sure that I have your issues articulated appropriately. And then the issue of the voter roll and how the voter roll is maintained and why the 87,000 returns for the mail ballots. And inside that concern, you are wondering if there can be an opportunity for individuals to report to the board when they have knowledge that someone who is on the registration rolls in the district is no longer a resident of the district. Does that kind of summarize your main concerns?
Yes, with the exception of the private property component. I believe that private property is private, but there are places in which it's not delineated that it's private versus public. So if you were to walk down the street by the wharf in front of the Anthem, you'd make the assumption that that's a public space. But it's treated as private space, even though taxpayer dollars went into the redevelopment. Another example is the giant in between P Street Northeast and 8th Street. That used to be a parking lot before the giant area was redeveloped. But that little strip of land, that strip of street technically is private property, even though the average driver wouldn't know that when they're going down that specific half block is private property. And we've been told, our petition circulator has been told to get off private property, even though there's no sign that delineates that sidewalk is private property.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. We will definitely examine these issues with the board. And Mr. Holman, I'm happy to hear from you because as someone who served on the redistricting task force, I've been curious as to how the redistricting process that we put in place was working. So thank you for your information this morning. I am concerned that we should have a standard, in my opinion, as it relates to how we count the ballots. Either we count them by some, I'll say, invisible precinct lines, or we do count them by where we actually pick up the ballots. And I think since we have moved from precinct voting to drop box and mail voting, it might make sense for us to look a little closer at defining the collection of ballots by ward or by the drop box. And I think that would be, that may help us to understand better, but we'll examine that issue with the Board of Elections. And now the timing of the reporting, can you talk a little more about that and how it's the effect that it seems to have on the final outcome, if any?
It doesn't have an effect on the final outcome. Where the effect is the votes, especially for citywide elections, the wards don't all vote the same way, obviously. So when you're reporting a batch of votes from Ward 6, both in terms of how they vote for and also just the quantity of votes, can swing an election, can look like it's swinging an election one way versus the other when it's not really in the end. It's just how they're being reported. And when you look back at how they were being reported, they were certainly doing, wards 1 through 4 and 8 on these days, and then wards 5 and 6 and 5, 6, and 8 on the other days, and 1 through 4 on the other day. So again, it's not an issue of whether the final results are right. Just when you sort of have this obvious geographic flow of how votes are being counted, the transparency there is vital in terms of continuing to engender trust in our elections and giving confidence in the outcomes. If we have something close where the votes are swinging every third day or every day when the votes are being released, that's probably not a good outcome. So that's all that's sort of the issue with how they're being counted.
Yeah, I can see that. And it seems to me for transparency, ballots we receive across the city should be tabulated and reported daily, if we're going to have daily or every other day for the whole city. I kind of we will examine these issues with the Board of Elections. And now, Ms. Brazil, as I mentioned to you a few weeks ago, I did a tour of the facility. My conclusion was that it was definitely in poor standing as a facility to be used by our personnel. So I begun the process of planning for a different location. As you know, the agency did not include a request for capital improvements in the budget. So that means that that facility is likely to stay as it is, and the resources that the agency has available to it will continue, as you probably saw it, you said in 2020. And as I saw it about 3-4 months ago, I guess it was about 4 months ago. So with that being the situation, for me, the alternative is to find a very suitable place for that part of the operations. So thank you very much for that testimony. And those pictures I'm very familiar with. That's exactly what I saw. Only when I was there, there were no tables set up because it was after the vote count. But it's an untenable situation. And something maybe you didn't discover, but I discovered, is that it doesn't have ventilation. So that's a biggie in any situation like this where we have individuals assemble. And the toilet, the porta johns are on the inside in the landing area of the building. Yes, correct.
But
Yeah.
it's on the loading dock, but it's still the exterior of the building.
Well, it's bricked in loading dock, if you want to call it that. That's what I saw. So, maybe you saw something different. I saw the area, but anyway, it is a problem, and we know it's a problem. And we're going to make changes. We'll see what the agency has to say about their plans for it.
Could I just add one thing, because I have been very, very concerned about this issue. I've never come across something like this in all the years that I've tried to monitor and follow DC government. What I did was I went back and tried to figure out, how did we get to this point? The warehouse that the Board of Elections is currently using to process the ballots is the one there are 2 warehouses they have on their street, but the one that they use to process the ballots is in the worst shape. And they had been using that to store equipment and their files and things like that. When the decision was made to do mail-in ballots, the Board of Elections decided to cite the tabulation of the votes in that warehouse. Now, I don't know if the timing was short. I don't know of the other extraneous factor, but that was back in 2020. Certainly by the time we got to 2022, they had time to reevaluate the decision to have their vote centered there and to move it to other locations. At one time years ago, they used to use the old council chamber at 441 for the processing of ballots. Now, in the times we find ourselves in, with so many commercial buildings in the downtown area being vacant, so many other properties of the District of Columbia having adequate space for a properly staffed, well-lit, well-ventilated tabulating center with toilet facilities, with potable water. I don't understand why both the Board of Elections and the Department of General Services are trying to paint this picture, as they have since January, when I really started making inquiry. Oh, there are issues, but we're on top of it. At the last Board of Elections hearing a monthly meeting last week. I asked the question, what will it take to bring the warehouse up to par? Because I had a document from the executive office of the mayor's budget office saying that the Board of Elections was seeking $500,000 to make repairs on a privately owned piece of property. The response I got at the Board of Elections meeting last week was, it's more than $500,000. It's more than $1 million. So I appreciate the fact that you've done what you said you would do in terms of raise the issue, but I think we need to raise the issue and also say, we shouldn't be in that warehouse. We shouldn't be paying a private leaseholder for a building in that condition. We shouldn't be housing employees in that condition. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Brazil. And I have shared with you the course of action that I am going to take, and I'm going to stay in that mode of operation. I think, you know, what you have presented to us in photographs, and certainly what I saw is an untenable situation. I don't know, this is a new committee for me, okay? I wasn't here in 2020 to deal with it in these terms. But now that I'm here, and it is at my, I have to be a little more engaged in this. And first step is to make sure that there is a suitable location for vote counting, for the training of the personnel. The warehouse, as you have articulated, is where they store their equipment. And it's a warehouse. That's all it is a warehouse. And that seems to be appropriate for plastic, metal, the equipment that's stored there. But for the operating center, it does not seem to be suitable for people that will be asked to work there when we have our 2024 election. So the goal is to make sure that we have a different location for vote counting. And remember, vote counting will probably go on for a few months. It's not like, just a week or 2 weeks. It will, because we'll be counting the mail ballots that, will be coming in. The tabulation has to go on there. And more importantly, they also use the facility for training personnel. You have mentioned 60, most likely we will have maybe as many as 80 individuals that have to go through the training, and training doesn't happen in one day. So it is not a very suitable location for DC government to conduct its day-to-day business as it relates to elections preparation. So we understand that. So we will be working on that.
I would be remiss if I didn't stress one important point. As a good government watchdog, what is so important to me is not only how our DC government agencies function, but the fact that when it comes to elections, a critical component of an election is the ability for there to be watchers, observers of the process. That is why on election day, I go to 20 to 40 polling sites. Not that I'm looking to find something wrong, but I want to be eyes and ears on the process. The way both Alice Miller and Monica Evans have operated the Board of Elections in terms of even the tabulating facility they have at their main office on Half Street is to make it very difficult for citizens to observe the process. I think a key component of what you're going to do, Ms. Bonds, is not only to establish a suitable facility for the employees to operate and tabulate votes, but also a suitable facility, similar to the photograph I showed you from Philadelphia, where you have, whether or not it's a gymnasium or a large room or an auditorium or something, where you can have tables, space, so that observers can walk around and observe the tabulation of the process. So everybody walks away saying that was an honest and fair election. Otherwise, you're going to have spitballs thrown at the district.
Thank you very much, Ms. Brazil. I appreciate your testimony. And we will talk with the director. She's coming up next about these matters. Mr. Amini, thank you very much for your testimony. And I made a couple of notes. Your particular concern about the need for more than one outreach specialist is good advice. And do you have when you say make sure that the first one or the initial outreach specialist is proficient in Spanish, are you thinking about the need based on our census population count, or what are you thinking? Because you're saying more than one, and we all go to Spanish as the default, proficiency need. So,
well, I myself I'm an Amharic speaker, and many non-citizens in DC speak Amharic or Tigrinya or other languages from East Africa. And French in West African immigrants speak, mostly French, but it is apparent if you look at the census data, if you look at the communities in DC, that Spanish is the top priority, and this multilingual specialist we should first prioritize and making sure that we have someone who is proficient in Spanish. You are perfectly right that one specialist is not going to be enough, that we should increase the number of specialists, multilingual specialists that we have. And I would definitely recommend that the second one we hire be proficient in Amharic specifically. And not only spoken Amharic, but also written. Written Amharic is quite difficult. It's not quite as simple as translating something into Spanish, for example. So we need someone that is very proficient in that if we're going to hire a second and third. And we need really a team of outreach specialists that have proficiency in a wide range of languages, the top being Spanish and Amharic.
okay, well, thank you for that. And we will explore what the dates are for the update of the code for sure. So we'll do that.
Absolutely, and it's kind of related to what the other witness, Nicholas Schiller, was saying, of this question of like, do non-citizens have if there is ballot initiative being collected currently, do non-citizens count in that? And that is related to the DCMR and making sure that the regulations match the DC code, so that there is no questions when it comes to litigation, which always seems to happen. And it's almost a given that if there is a ballot, there will be litigation, that there is no discrepancy between the code and the municipal regulations. Yes.
I appreciate that, and I could give an opinion, but that's not what we're here for. In fact, I will ask the agency what is their interpretation of the law and how do they plan on implementing it. So that should help us to understand where we are with this law and whether or not it needs some modification perhaps. Okay. So thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you all for being here, and you're welcome to stay if you'd like. We will be here for a bit longer.
Thank you.
Okay. Now we will hear from our government witnesses. Our first witness is Ms. Monica Evans. the Executive Director of the DC Board of Elections. And she will be testifying remotely. I see Ms. Montgomery. And there is, all right. And Ms. Evans.
Yes, good morning.
All righty. If you would raise your right hand, Ms. Evans, we'll swear you in. Do you swear and affirm that your testimony and any statements that you make before us today to be complete and truthful?
I do.
All righty, thank you. And we'll receive your testimony now. Ms. Evans, are you speaking?
I was speaking and
Okay, now we can hear you. All righty.
turned my mic off after I was sworn in. I will begin again. Thank you. Good morning, Chairperson Bonds and members of the Committee on Executive Administration and Labor and Staff. I am Monica Evans, the Executive Director of DC Board of Elections. With me today is Terry Stroud, the board's General Counsel. As you know, the Board of Elections, or BOE, is a chartered independent agency with our mission to enfranchise eligible residents, conduct elections, and ensure the integrity of the electoral process. Planning for the 2024 election cycle officially began with debriefing meetings held with our contractors after the 2022 general election. We discussed current and emerging technology, training, and equipment issues. We also received feedback from staff and the public and conducted briefings with election workers. Preparation also includes the development of draft calendars for the 2024 June primary and November general elections. As far as new legislation, we have the Local Residents Voting Rights Amendment Act of 2022, and that allows non-citizens to vote in local elections. This will require BOE to make database modifications, create new educational materials, modify voter registration forms, and hire a dedicated multilingual staff person in our voter education and outreach division. We will also need to conduct internal training and modify our training for election workers. The Elections Modernization Amendment Act of 2022 requires BOE to mail a ballot for every election we administer, operate vote centers, utilize mail ballot drop boxes, and launch a data visualization dashboard on our website. In order to properly administer the requirements of this act, we will create a mail ballot processing unit and identify staff to maintain the dashboard and conduct the required data analysis. Our Voter Education and Outreach Division administers year-round education, outreach, and engagement activities and programs. To prepare for the 2024 election cycle, VEOD will focus its strategic efforts regarding all eligible voters in the District of Columbia. VEOD conducts outreach and education efforts through an equity lens of inclusion and mindfulness. Target groups include voters with limited English proficiency, seniors and voters with disabilities, high school students, college students, first-time voters, displaced and homeless citizens, faith-based community, and communities with low voter registration. The list of planned outreach activities includes tabling, voter registration training, voter registration drives, voter education presentations, community and civic meetings, job fairs, health fairs, school fairs, citywide festivals, community outreach events, virtual meetings and workshops, and an election worker recruitment open house. Discussion topics include voter registration, voting requirements, voting options, voting accessibility and accommodations, key election dates, election preparedness, election worker program, and conducting a voter registration drive. Targeted outreach regarding the Local Residents Voting Rights Amendment Act will include multiple touch points with non-citizens in the District of Columbia. We will reach out to the Office of Human Rights and the Mayor's Office of Community Affairs. Working with students, incarcerated, and returning citizens, BOE continues to work with schools to ensure students are registered to vote. Each school year, a letter is sent to every principal that explains our outreach efforts. BOE has established a relationship at the administrative level with DCPS's Director of Social Studies. This helps to ensure the approach for communicating voter registration information to DCPS students is performed in a consistent manner. We have also reached out to the Social Studies Content and Curriculum Manager to add information about the Restore the Vote legislation to the Social Studies curriculum. BOE has community outreach initiatives to engage high school and college students. The Campus Engagement Project was launched to promote voter education and voter registration with district residents who are attending local colleges and universities. In addition, BOE developed the Graduate to Vote initiative to engage high school seniors about voting in the District of Columbia and to register them to vote before graduation day. In an effort to reach students outside of the traditional school setting, BOE works with other agencies and organizations such as Community of Hope and MICVA Challenge to engage youth. We also work with the Department of Youth Rehabilitation Services for the purpose of voter registration. We will continue to establish and cultivate relationships with community partners in support of returning and incarcerated citizens. BOE will work with the Department of Corrections to conduct education and registration drives, work with the Office of Human Rights to educate incarcerated citizens of their rights upon release, work with Court Services and Offender Supervision Community Agency, or CSOSA, to present at their quarterly video conference, disseminate informational posters that articulate the rights of incarcerated and returning citizens, and coordinate with the events with the Mayor's Office on Returning Citizen Affairs. DC residents who are incarcerated for a felony retain the right to vote. The Restore the Vote legislation requires that the DOC, or Department of Corrections, become an automatic voter registration agency. The DOC has implemented a process to provide each qualified elector an opportunity to register. In addition to the DOC's efforts, staff members from BOE, the CIC, and advocacy groups will provide in-person outreach in an effort to improve general election knowledge and increase registrations. All registered voters in the DOC will be mailed a ballot for each election in 2024. Vote centers will be set up at the 2 DOC facilities to allow in-person early voting. As we did in 2022, we plan to train and utilize incarcerated residents to work as election workers with the goal of providing a higher level of exposure and understanding of the election process. Registration and outreach efforts in the Federal Bureau of Prisons, or BOP, will occur entirely by mail and email. BOE will mail packets of educational and voter registration materials to each facility for distribution by staff to the impacted residents. As far as technology enhancements, during the 2022 election cycle, BOE began the use of VOSUM and curbside printers. VOSUM is petition management software that is used to streamline the petition process by using page, signature, and address recognition in conjunction with our voter registration database to monitor, track, and verify petitions. The curbside printers are mobile printers that are used for printing voter check-in receipts to provide a printed ballot for curbside voters. This streamlined the wait times for curbside voters and made curbside voting more efficient. We will continue both practices during the 2024 election cycle. We are also reviewing software updates that are required to implement the newly enacted legislation. We will need to update our voter registration system, Voter Focus, and our PollPad software interfaces. In our 2024 budget, we received funding to purchase additional mail ballot sorting and processing equipment. We are also exploring the purchase of additional ballot on demand printers that are necessary to facilitate our vote center operations. As far as accessibility, we will conduct an accessibility survey of all prospective vote centers before the 2024 primary election, regardless of whether they have been used previously or not, to ensure the vote centers remain accessible. As is our practice, we will partner with DGS to ensure that vote centers are structurally accessible. In the past, DGS has provided a team of facility managers, building managers, and engineers to correct structural issues at vote centers, making such modifications as installing automatic door openers, temporarily removing narrow doors, providing temporary ramps, and removing center poles that were obstructing narrow doorways. We will also ensure that election workers are aware of the Americans with Disabilities Act guidelines, as well as the operational accessibility concerns that have been raised, and are trained to promptly and effectively address these issues as they arise. As far as our voter registration rolls and list maintenance, we encourage voters to review and update their voter registration information regularly. We conduct a canvass after every general election that allows us to move voters from an active to an inactive status and make other necessary adjustments to the voter registry. We realize the challenges faced with generating accurate lists of those registered to vote in the district, and acknowledge that DC is a very transient city. We will partner with universities to get updates regarding students who no longer reside in university housing. Our 2023 list maintenance process is well underway. A non-forwardable postcard is being sent to every voter who did not vote in the November 2022 general election. And based on that data, we will mail a second postcard that is forwardable to those individuals. The forwardable postcard will also be mailed to voters who had a ballot returned as undeliverable in 2022. Our election worker training division is revising the election worker handbook and the training curriculum based on recently passed legislation. The recruitment of quality election workers is important, and their presence at vote centers requires attention to detail. During the 2024 election cycle, our goal is to recruit and train between 2,000 and 2,500 election workers. We will deploy approximately 1,700 election workers to serve at vote centers. Election worker training will begin on Tuesday, March 12, 2024. We will offer training classes for registration clerks, ballot clerks, voter assistance clerks, site coordinators, and area reps. Classes will be offered 6 to 7 days a week for 10 weeks. Election worker training consists of a comprehensive program that includes various effective components, such as hands-on activities with the voting equipment and poll pads, detailed instructions on properly processing various categories of special ballot voters, proper distribution of paper ballots, instructions on expedient but accurate voter check-in, and instructions on how to process curbside voters and voters with special needs. The classes include PowerPoint presentations, role plays, and evaluations of class attendees. In order to be eligible to serve as an election worker, class attendees must also pass a mandatory quiz. During the 2022 election cycle, we implemented an online training module to complement the required in-person training classes. The online training component allows election workers to view the online training classes at any time, and the modules serve as a great refresher opportunity. The online training is fully accessible to those with disabilities. We received positive feedback from the election workers during the suite regarding the suite of online training courses. The online training module will also be used during the 2024 election cycle. Mail ballots. As previously mentioned, and as required by law, BOE will mail every voter a ballot during the 2024 election cycle. Due to the passage of the Local Residents Voter Rights Amendment Act, we will also mail ballots that contain local contests to non-citizens. Therefore, the number of ballot styles we create will essentially double. We are working with the Office of Contracts and Procurement to secure a mail house to produce and mail the ballot packets. Each mail ballot packet will include an outbound envelope with U.S. Postal Service intelligent mail barcode, an inbound envelope also with the intelligent mail barcode, and voter instructions with an I voted sticker attached. Voters should start receiving ballots by the first week of May, and mail ballot drop boxes will tentatively open no later than mid-May. There will be subsequent mailings through the registration deadline of mail ballot packets. Ballots returned to a mail ballot drop box or to a vote center will be retrieved by staff on a daily basis. These ballots are scanned by the mail ballot sorter and voter data is uploaded into the VR system. The VR system data is communicated to the e-poll books at the vote centers on a daily basis. Once a voter profile is marked as ballot returned, the voter can no longer vote a live ballot at any vote center during early voting or on election day. Conversely, once a voter is given credit for voting at a vote center, that data is downloaded to the board's VR system and into the board sorter. Thus, any mail ballot that is returned by the voter after they have voted at a vote center will be flagged and rejected. The board is proposing to place 55 mail ballot drop boxes that will be placed throughout the city. We plan to operate 25 early vote centers and a total of 75 election day vote centers. The proposed locations will be posted for public comment no later than September 2023. As far as our partnerships and supports, as always, we rely on our partners for success. As has historically been the case, BOE receives support from the Department of General Services, the Office of Disability Rights, the Department of Public Works, the local and federal departments of Homeland Security, the Department of Transportation, the Office of Contracting and Procurement, the Office of the Chief Technology Officer, Metropolitan Police Department, DC Parks and Recs, DC Schools, the Department of Motor Vehicles, DC Public Library, and other government agencies. We continue to remain grateful to these agencies for their years of ongoing support of elections operations. In conclusion, as always, it is the board's goal to provide competent and professional service to every registered voter in the District of Columbia. Through our focused efforts on the election processes and office administration, we look forward to continuing to do so. We will always review, modify, and adjust our processes and procedures wherever possible so that we improve our operations with each election. The passage of the Elections Modernization Amendment Act and the Local Residents Voting Rights Amendment Act will necessitate significant changes to our operations. However, we are working diligently to ensure we are compliant during the 2024 election cycle. Thank you, and we are available to answer your questions.
Thank you very much for your testimony this morning, Ms. Evans. As you know, we will continue to visit with you every 3-4 months until we get to the election. That's to help us be assured that, or be comfortable that we are moving forward with the 2024 election. I do have a number of questions that have been posed by our witnesses today, the public witnesses. And let's start with one that I think is very elementary. And could you clarify for me your definition of qualified elector?
I will absolutely let our general counsel weigh in on this.
Okay, thank you.
She may actually want to start with that definition.
So So pre the Local Resident Voting Rights Act, the term qualified elector meant a person who is at least 17 years of age and who will be 18 years of age on or before the next general election, is a citizen of the United States, has maintained a residence in the district for at least 30 days preceding the next election and does not claim voting residence or right to vote in any state or territory, and has not been found by a court of law to be legally incompetent to vote. And the changes that were made with respect to due to the Local Resident Voting Rights Act is that the section regarding citizenship reads as a citizen of the United States, except that this subparagraph shall not apply in a local election. And local election in turn is defined as, one moment, an election for mayor, chairman of the council, attorney general, member of the State Board of Education, advisory neighborhood commissioner, or an election on an initiative, referendum, recall, or charter amendment measure on a district ballot.
All right, so the definition has been updated. So the definition is very clear that it does include the local resident election laws. Am I correct?
Well, the current statute that's online does not include the language. The language that's provided by the council's own website does not include the updated language. Not sure why that is, and maybe, I'm not sure why that is, but it is not included on the council's, the statute that is provided via the council's website. But the updates to the Local Resident Voting Rights Act would update the definition of qualified elector to include the language that I just read to you.
All right, and is it included on the Board of Elections website?
The updated language is not included on the board's website.
All right, and when would that change be made, since it became law in March of 2023?
So we can update our regulations, we can update the website, but there are changes that have to be made before those updates can be given life. And that is what is currently taking place. We're working on the administrative things that have to happen before. We don't have a form right now that would allow non-residents to vote. There are several things that have to take place before this language can be given life.
Okay, can you articulate some of the things that have to take place before it can be given life?
Well, we have to develop a form. We are still discussing what the voter registry, what we could do with the voter registry. There are different, there's a plethora of considerations that have to be, and decisions that have to be made in order to determine what the regulations would look like to make it so the implementation would be effective.
So what is your timeline for having the information processed and ready for posting on the Board of Elections website?
That's something that we're working on. That's something that the agency is working on.
Okay, so you don't have a timeline as of today?
Not a final timeline.
Okay. Well, let's kind of talk about this, because it is law now, and approximately 90 days have passed. Are we thinking that in another 90 days, the law will be updated on your website Because we had a witness in this morning's hearing who indicated there may be individuals who want to begin the registration process, that are categorized as non-citizens.
Yes, and as we explained at the board meeting, we are working on regulations for that, but we are looking at considerations and choices that have to be made administratively. Like we could do the rulemaking, and we do plan on doing a rulemaking at the next board meeting. And we talked about the different phases of rulemaking that we would be engaging in to implement not only the Local Resident Voting Rights Act, but also the EMA, the Election Modernization Act. And so we could do the rulemaking, but we're still working on some administrative decisions that would be, that are decisions that are being finalized before we can fully implement the program.
All right, so then you're indicating to us that at the next board meeting, which is it in July, or are we talking a later time?
It will be July 18th.
Okay, July 18th meeting, there will be a discussion about the rulemaking.
We submitted a rulemaking for publication in the DC Register and wanted to wait until that was settled before we began the next phases of rulemaking.
All right, okay. So it is in progress, as you said, and the steps that you're going through are one, which is what is required by law, that the proposed rulemaking is published in the DC Register, and you will receive that advice. But it does sound like you could very easily have that advice within the next 30 to 60 days. Am I
would say
target with that?
Yes, 60 days.
Okay, 60 days. All right. Okay. Just, sometimes when activity is in progress, it's hard to really come up with timeline, but I wanted to at least get on the record that we're moving and to give us some sense of what it might look like. The other issue of great concern as it relates to implementing the local resident election is how are we going to do it, or how are we going to do it if we have persons with that are non-English speaking? You indicated that there will be some assistance perhaps at the polls. So have you put together a package of, or do you have a plan for how we're going to implement this to bring it full circle to the public that may need the services in order to register and of course to vote?
Yes, thank you, Council Member. This is something we've been thinking about, and even though we've had some draft plans, the plans are just being finalized as we have received our FY 2024 budget. And of course, a lot of this begins with education and outreach. We have updated our brochures and informational materials, and they are being translated into different languages. We did receive money to hire a multilingual outreach specialist. And so after October 1, we will be able to bring that individual on board. We are also working with staff members to update our informational materials and our training materials to ensure that not only are staff aware of all of the new changes, but also as we are training our election workers, that they are fully aware of all of the changes. When you get to vote centers, we've always ensured that we have language access at our vote centers, either through language line or having on-site interpreters at various vote centers based on.
Excuse me, Ms. Evans, I agree that focusing on the vote centers is where we're likely to have the majority of participants who are non-English speaking. And so you want to have everything in place there. But if we could just go back a tad, you mentioned you're updating your brochure, which is the public information that you're going to disseminate in the community. And that you have hired, I believe you said you had hired a multilingual outreach specialist. Can we talk a little bit about the brochures and how they're going to be disseminated?
Yes, and just to correct one thing, council member, we have not hired, we received that money to hire a multilingual specialist in our 2024 budget.
Okay.
Actually,
All
have
right.
until October 1.
Okay, so this is, all right, okay. But the brochures, you have already published brochures?
They have not been published. We are working with getting the brochures translated because all of our informational brochures had to be updated to make sure they reflect all of the changes with new legislation. So the brochures have been updated, and now we're working on the translation of those brochures.
I see. So what is your timeline for having the completed text, and in how many different languages will it be featured?
We want to be prepared to roll out our entire suite of brochures in FY 2024, which begins October 1, because shortly after that, we plan to have our new outreach specialists on site. And so that's why we're not waiting until October to develop the program description. We are developing the description for that new specialist so that we can advertise as soon as we're able to do so. As far as the number of languages, it's typically six languages. Yes.
Okay, typically 6 languages. All
Yes.
right.
And those are the languages we have on our website as far as the languages of our voter registration applications.
All right. Now, one area that was also mentioned that is of great concern, and it really is a concern from the standpoint, it will be a concern from the standpoint of the council, and that is that voter registration within 30 days, if you've lived in the city for 30 days, and you can substantiate that, you are eligible to run and to be participate in elections by signing a petition, by certainly by being a registered voter. So we have the DMV program where when you register your vehicle, you now are in a situation where I think it's become law where you no longer indicate that you want to be registered. We automatically register you and you opt out. Now, my concern is, do the programs work together, or does one program not really address the requirements of the other program? Have you had conversations with the DMV about how they, for instance, issue their ID cards, or you're registering your vehicle?
Thank you. We have had conversations with DMV and have been working with them, not only with the implementation of the local Voter Rights Amendment Act, but also with the Automatic Voter Registration Amendment Act, which fully takes place during the 2026 election cycle. And so one of the things that was removed from the automatic voter registration list, where individuals are automatically placed on a list and those lists come to us, I understand it that non-citizens have been removed from that automatic data transmission to us. And so that helps the pieces of legislation to complement. We are still working with having conversations and working with processes to fully implement, because there will need to be modifications to both systems, modifications to the paper voter registration forms, and then also the voter registration application questions that DMV poses to clients they serve. I'll allow General Counsel to just add anything to that.
No, I think that's it. We're just, I think both agencies are working to ensure that that we'll have to change some things up, because right now we do not get the list of individuals who are not citizens. And we will be able to get that information in light of the Local Resident Voting Rights Act.
Okay, all right. So what is your timeline for having a process where non-citizen can register to vote? Maybe that's the part that we most need to be concerned with here today. Is this within 60 days, you're going to have the administrative processes perhaps in place, and then immediate thereafter, individuals who want to register can actually register with the Board of Elections?
Timeline right now is to have all systems in place to allow non-citizens to be to exercise their rights as qualified electors no later than January 1. We are working with our contractors, and they have a number of things that they have articulated to us that need to happen with our systems to make sure that individuals are properly coded, properly flagged, that we're properly getting the information, that our existing equipment is speaking to each other correctly, and also to ensure that non-citizens get the correct ballot. And so that would be the mail files and database files that are transmitted to to our mail house. And so we have a list that has been provided by our contractor. And so we are ticking through those items as far as all of the different changes about export, import, and flags that need to be in the system. And then, of course, we need to go through a period of testing. And so we will need to do a mock election once everything is in place to ensure that it's actually working properly before we roll anything out to the public.
All right, so you're not telling us that there will be a secondary registration list, and that list would contain those who are non-citizen. You're saying that the list will be, our registration list will be one list, and there will be codes within the list. Am I correct? That will define
Yes,
non-resident.
that is correct. That is conversations with our contractor.
I see. Okay. All right. Well, we will look forward to a fuller discussion about how we're going to modify the voter registration list as is currently maintained, so that it contains the codes and other information that you have indicated it would, in order to be able to identify the non-resident voter. So we will be asking questions about that again. Now I want to turn to the situation with the warehouse, and thank you all again for your generous time in taking me through the warehouse location where you store the elections equipment. As you know, one of our public witnesses, Dorothy Brazil, who is not, very well, also today issued a press advisory indicating her concerns about the warehouse. And her findings are very much the same that I found, I must say. She did not indicate that the ventilation was virtually non-existent, which I found. So I wanted to ask you, as you're thinking about the preparations for 2024, have you given thought as to the amount of space that you would need for the training? And if that amount is different from the amount of space or square footage that you would need for, let's say, the processing of the mail-in ballots, which you do over a period of, let's say 90 days. Have you given thought to any of that?
Yes, we have. And the first thing, if you'll forgive me just for a moment, Councilmember Bonds, the first thing I do want to state is we were very proactive in sharing that information and articulating the conditions of the warehouse. This was not something that any outside individual brought to our attention. We were very forthcoming with the conditions and made efforts to reach out to the necessary agencies and individuals to make improvements, because when we got the warehouse, we got exactly what we needed at that time, and that was a warehouse facility. Now that we have new legislation and new requirements, we are finding that we need space to do things and do things differently. And so I just want to be clear that we do not have conditions at the warehouse that were brought to our attention. We were the ones who put a spotlight on those matters. As far as the square footage and what is needed, DGS came over and walked through the space with us, and I don't have the square footage with me, but they know the exact square footage of the warehouse and the square footage of the sections of the warehouse that house equipment, the section where we're doing our mail ballot processing. And so they have all of that in their records. And so they are helping us to identify adequate space for the 2024 election cycle.
All right. And so in doing this identification of the space that you need, please keep me informed.
Absolutely.
After my tour with you, I came back and had a conversation with the chairman of the council, who also is committed to work with me if need be, to be assured that there will be a different location for the processing that you've used in years past, okay, as we move forward.
Thank you.
Yeah, this, there are a number of concerns that the location brought to mind, and you're aware of some of them, but bottom line is that you should have adequate ventilated process for staff on a daily basis, as well as for staff that would find themselves there for training or, temporarily to count ballots. I cannot believe that that kind of facility was initially approved as a place for those activities. Now, perhaps you made some determination after you were in the so-called warehouse that it was spacious and therefore you could have these other activities to take place, but it is not the kind of facility where we would want government employees or the public to participate in. So I want to talk with you a little more about this, because I want to make sure that whatever space that you and General Services are looking at, that it's not only adequate as it relates to square footage and meets those needs, but that it is available to those who want to keep up with the tallying of the ballot count. I just want that to be clear, please.
Yes.
All right.
It's, it's in my notes and we will ensure that we keep you aware of ongoing conversations and tentative decisions before anything is finalized.
Yes, yes, because Ms. Brazil has already pointed out that I believe she has copies of a correspondence between you and DGS, okay? So I just want to make it really clear where we're trying to go on this journey. The Board of Elections has been an excellent agency within our government that has assured us of wonderful outcomes, accurate, outcome from our elections, and they've been processed, effectively. And so we just want to keep that record moving forward. I do want to ask if you could update us on your plans as it relates to how you will report election results. Will it be using by ward, or will it continue to be these invisible precinct boundaries that may be problematic? And we can talk further about that.
Yes, and I think one of the things that was problematic in 2022, there was somewhat of a disconnect between the precincts the voters received and then how we were reporting. And a lot of that had to do with the extremely shortened timeline for drawing ward, ANC, and S&D boundaries as a result of the redistricting process according to the 2020 census. Due to the pandemic, all jurisdictions across the country got that information very late, and our timeline was much shorter than it's ever been to have the lines and precincts drawn. We are currently working with a consultant, and we are about to unroll our plan that will align precincts with SDs, and so that everything that is reported is consistently reported and there's no disconnect. And so that should be in place before the end of summer. But we have been really going through and looking voting block by voting block to ensure there are no anomalies and make sure that everything is properly aligned. And now that we no longer have precinct-based voting, but we will have to draw the precincts, we're developing and devising a system that will make it much easier for the public to understand, but then also much easier to view the results when they are posted. And voters should be able to determine their precinct and easily make the connection with the results that are posted on our website. So all of that will be improved for the 2024 election cycle.
Ms. Evans, I hear you, and it's a lot of great promises that you're making, and I do hope that we're able to fulfill all of these promises.
If I may.
I just wonder if there is, have you considered, or perhaps you may have already in place, a process where, for instance, ANCs might reach out to the board, of course in writing, with any technicalities that they have found in either the tabulation or individuals feeling that the ballot that they got was mismarked, for the, let's say, ANC single member district. I think it happens more at that level, and that's an area that we could pinpoint a little easier. Have you a process where even a voter who encountered that and thought that they were in one boundary or one side of the boundary, but really were living on the other side, is there a process, or is there an individual that they can reach out to?
We don't have a specific process, but we have had individuals reach out to us, and they typically just call our main number, and we have trained our frontline staff on addressing those issues. But there is some confusion, and we have recognized that confusion with the way the process unfolded, with some individuals being in one ward, but their ANC may reflect a different ward. So they may be in Ward 6 for one thing and Ward 8A for their ANC SMD. So we are trying to help with educating people when they see, something that looks out of the ordinary when they're looking at their voter registration. But we do not have a particular person handling those issues, but they are ultimately funneled to our Chief Information Security Officer, who is overseeing the process with data services and working with our consultant formerly with the Office of the ANC to look at all lines and to make sure we're communicating properly with individuals and answering questions as they arise.
All right, so Ms. Evans, and as you were explaining, I'm wondering, when you say that your staff is working to help people understand, how many situations have you encountered since we did the 2020 redistricting that have caused the board to make modifications or changes?
I don't have that number. I can research and talk to staff members and get that number to you.
All right, please do, because it may very well be that we are now in the world of looking at these boundaries. Maybe one side of the street was miscounted. I just want to know. I think we need to make sure that whatever law we are implementing, it is the law that was passed.
Absolutely. I have your question and we will follow up with you.
All right. On another issue, what is your timeline for implementing vote counting equipment and other necessary equipment for the 2024 election?
Well, we just, as you know, received our 2024 budget. And so we know what we got and what we did not get. And so we have already reached out to vendors and reached out to the Office of Contracts and Procurement. And it really is dependent on our contractors to get the equipment to us. We have indicated what we've been funded to receive, and we have started the process. I do not have an exact timeline, but we do expect to have all equipment before January of 2024.
All right, and so if, let's say you get all the equipment and it's January 1, 2024, what is the time frame that you utilize for testing the equipment and for training purposes?
Yes, so we'll begin election worker training in March. We also conduct logic and accuracy testing. I don't have the exact date in front of me, but that is listed on our draft calendar. But essentially, when we begin logic and accuracy testing, everything needs to be in place as far as any new equipment we will be purchasing. At this point, as I mentioned, we know what we'll get. The only outstanding equipment purchase will be our ballot on demand printers. We weren't specifically funded for that in the 2024 budget. So we're looking at other means to secure those ballot on demand printers, because that is what is necessary to allow in-person voters to vote at vote centers, because that allows anyone to pull up their individual ballot style wherever they go vote and print out that ballot. And so we know we will have to figure out what our budget looks like and the number of vote centers we have, and back into the number of ballot on demand printers. So that is the big kind of outstanding issue. And looks like logic and accuracy testing is going to begin on April 15th.
On April 15th? That's your testing?
Yes. and that is open to the public. And we post that on our website.
And what is the timeline for bringing mail ballot drop boxes, making them available?
That we want to open mail ballot drop boxes no later than mid-May. We always have to work with DPW because we have a partnership with them to actually install the drop boxes at the locations. So the first step, which will be completed in September of 2023, is publicizing the list of proposed mail ballot drop boxes and getting comments from the public. And we send, of course, our proposed list to the council. We send it out social media, we make any adjustments. And once we have a final list of where those mail ballot drop boxes will be placed, we forward that list to DPW, and they help us with identifying a timeline for putting the drop boxes in place. Don't know what the placement schedule will be, but we are planning to open them about May 10th with ballots being mailed the first week in May.
All right, well, are you going to use the same ballot boxes or would it be a different type of ballot box?
No, we have 55 mail ballot drop boxes, and so we will use the same mail ballot drop boxes we've used in 2022 and 2020.
Okay, and what is the capacity of those mailboxes?
As far as the number of ballots?
Yeah, the number of ballots they could actually contain. They look huge to me, but what is the number? Do you have a sense of what the volume, maybe cubic square feet or something?
Get the exact dimensions, and then based on what the vendors have provided that gave us the drop boxes just to determine what the capacity of each one is. I'm not sure, but we have 1 to 2 mail ballot drop box pickups as soon as the mail ballot drop boxes are open. And as we saw with the 2022 general election, election day was by far the busiest day, and we actually had 3 mail ballot drop box pickups on that day. And I would say that they all 3 were needed, but they the boxes were not beyond capacity. But I can get you the details on that
Okay.
also.
All right, thank you. Thank you. Let me ask you, as it relates to the ballots that are removed from the drop boxes, where do you plan to store them in the 2024 election? Is it store them before you begin to count them?
Yes, well, typically they would be stored in our mail ballot processing center. And so that is what we are exploring as far as where that mail ballot processing center will be housed in 2024. But we have teams of 2. Those mail ballot drop boxes go into locked facilities with tamper-proof seals until we're ready to start processing. But typically we make sure our ballot processing and the staff we have on board coincide. So once we get the majority of ballots to begin us to start that process in earnest, we have individuals trained and they will start the initial processing of those ballots. So we're not waiting until it's time to tabulate before we at least start processing.
All right, just very quickly, wanted to just go over a couple of questions as it relates to the Elections Modernization, Amendment Act of 2021. Will the board, as of today, be ready to mail to every qualified elector a ballot?
I tentatively say yes, only because the Office of Contracts and Procurement is taking us through the process. And so they had us identify additional vendors other than K&H Mail House. K&H Mail House is who we have traditionally used. If we were using K&H Mail House, I could say absolutely yes, with 100% certainty. We are also looking at 3 other vendors, and we had to get quotes and information for OCP, and that would be Phoenix Graphics, Orange Press, and Runback are the other 3 mail house facilities. And we provided information to OCP, but of course, we have to go through that process before we have certainty with the vendor we'll be able to use for 2024.
All right, and so Ms. Evans, when you say OCP, the Office of Contracts and Procurement, they have what required you or asked you to look at more than one vendor?
That is correct.
Okay, and so the vendor that you used in 22, was that a ongoing relationship, like exercising an option year usage, or was that how was that vendor selected?
We initially selected that vendor in 2020 for the general election, and then used them in 2022 for the primary and general. And we were able to, and I don't have all the details, but we were able to piggyback on an existing contract so that we could engage with them directly. And now that we're beyond that period, we're having to do a little more work with OCP to ensure that we are not running afoul of any contracting procedures.
Yes, thank you for that. All right, we'll follow up with you on that for sure, and with the Office of Campaign Finance. This vendor, is this the vendor that does your mailing of the ballots, or is this the vendor that does or is involved in tabulation?
K&H Mail House, we essentially send an electronic mail file to them, and it has the ballot styles associated with the voters. And so they prepare the mail ballot packet that goes out to the voter. And so that includes the ballot, the return envelope, I voted sticker, and it has an intelligent mail barcode so that our ballot tracker is able to track that ballot through the system. Once those ballots are delivered to Board of Elections, the mail house is not involved in the tabulation. The tabulation happens under our watch.
All right, so when you say the tabulation happens under your watch, you mean you use equipment perhaps, but is that correct?
Yes, we use equipment.
Okay, but there is no vendor agreement involved.
Correct.
This is the energy of the District of Columbia personnel, and it's volunteers for the election cycle, correct?
Yes, under supervision of full-time staff, we hire temporary workers.
All right, okay. Can we talk a minute about the filling of vacancies, A and C vacancies? Have you given thought to whether or not it is a process that the Board of Elections should be involved in?
Yes, I have given thought to it, and it would not be my preference to do so. One, we're not staffed to do so, and it would require more resources in order to take that on, in its totality and all the different pieces, particularly given the number of A and C vacancies you have at any given time, and the fact that those vacancies occur not all at once. And so throughout the year, that would just put quite a workload on us to never be able to be out of election mode while we are preparing for the next primary and general election. So to oversee all of those vacancies, I would say would be something that would definitely stretch our resources and stretch staff capacity, quite honestly.
All right, well, thank you for that. As you know, there are ballot initiatives related to elections being filed. And I wanted to just query, what is the current timeline for approving the ballot initiative? And this is the most recent one.
Yes, I will turn that over to our general counsel.
All right.
So we did receive a ballot initiative that would impact election operations. We will have a proper subject hearing on July 18th with respect to that one. If it's found to be a proper subject, then within 20 days, we will formulate the formulations, a short title, summary statement, and legislative text for the measure, publish that in the DC Register for a 10-day review period. If there is no challenge to the formulations or any other aspect of the measure, then we will process that. And if we issue the petition as a result of after any litigation, or if there is no litigation that has to be entertained with respect to that, then we will issue the petition at a public meeting, and then the circulator will have a certain amount of time to circulate that petition. And the petition for the June election would have to be submitted by, let's see, looking at our draft calendar. I believe it would be due on, I'm sorry, I'm looking at, trying to find the date that the petitions for the June primary would have to be due. 1 second. February 5th of 2024
Okay, February 5th. All righty.
is when the petition would have to be submitted in order for it to appear on the June ballot, assuming that everything goes according to plan, meaning if it's found to be a proper subject, there is, depending on if there's any litigation, but at the end of the day, the petition would have to be submitted by February 5th.
All right. And how does this relate to having all of the administrative background together in order to define the status of the non-citizen who is eligible to vote in the 24 election? And what I'm asking is really, will that individual or those individuals be eligible to sign these petitions? Will they be eligible to run as a candidate in these elections of 2024?
My plain reading of how the statute would read appears to indicate that the answer to those questions would be yes, but that's just my reading of the statute. I'm not, and I guess you could speak to what the council's intent was with respect to the Local Resident Voting Rights Act. I mean, I think, this is council legislation, but my reading of the statute would be that you've expanded the term qualified elector to include, to not be limited to US citizens. And since you've expanded that definition, the term qualified elector applies in different contexts. And so looking at those other contexts, I suspect that they would be able to sign petitions. They would be able to run for local offices.
Okay. I think that's been a question that many have pondered, and I can say when we passed the legislation, that certainly the implication was that that these individuals who were residents in the District of Columbia were then given all of the I'll say the entrapments of citizenship in the District of Columbia as it related only to District of Columbia matters. So this will be very interesting time. So thank you very much. I just had to get that question out into the public domain, because there have been a number of questions we have received. You know, when will this happen? How can it happen, et cetera. So thank you very much for that.
And Councilmember Bonds,
Yes,
I may just revisit a previous question you asked about the capacity of our mail ballot drop boxes.
yes.
So it looks like they are 44-gallon mail ballot drop boxes, and they can house about 5,000 ballots.
All right, thank you very much for that. So it seems to me we have not had any reporting that would indicate we were anywhere near filled if you're collecting them on a daily basis, but
Correct.
thank you very much for that.
We do typically have 2 pickups a day, and as I mentioned, on Election Day for November, we had 3, and we did have adequate staff assigned to that.
All righty. What milestones have you set for the agency that may be different from what we in the public domain are thinking about the upcoming election that is different from what we maybe experienced in 2020 or 2022?
I would say our main milestones have in some ways been handed to us with the passage of new legislation. And of course, we have the data visualization dashboard that we are looking to place on our website, which will allow voters or anyone with access to the website to actually view and parse out election data regarding elections and voters. I also hope to make sure that we're being a lot more transparent, and as we have been trying to do for quite some time now, just really rework our website so that information is easily identifiable and it's placed in a way that members of the public can readily find it. We are currently in the process of interviewing for a director of communications, and I really want to get a seasoned communications official in that role who can help us with that information and ensuring that we are being as transparent and putting information in a way that is easily usable by the public. So those are definitely some things. Also, one of the things I noticed in 2022, even with all of our efforts to educate the public through brochures, through print, radio, television, yard signs, door hangers, there were still individuals who were aware of some changes to elections in DC and were not aware of those until they went to vote on Election Day. And so even with our efforts, I think that, you never are satisfied. And so I really want to improve our communication and make sure we're reaching all residents in the District of Columbia and making sure that we're adequately addressing the digital divide.
All right, well, I think you kind of covered this, but I will ask anyway. What is the biggest problem that you are facing at the board today?
One, well, of course, just making sure we have the time to really adjust to all of the legislation. We have a lot of things that we're having to implement, and then we're also looking ahead to legislation that will not be enacted until 2026. And so there are a lot of pieces to the various things that have been enacted, which will require us to modify systems, change systems, procure equipment. And so we need to really make sure all of those things are working in tandem, not just with what we're required to do in 2024, but also looking ahead to 2026. And so that is, I would say, one of the big challenges. And then with the EMA, or the Elections Modernization Amendment Act, and just standing up this mail ballot processing unit. And thank you, we were funded to do that. And so as we look for the location for this unit, just making sure we have all of the elements to ensure that it's a smooth process, and with adequate leadership, because we'll be hiring for that unit.
All right, well, let me just get a couple more.
And if it didn't come across, of course, when I talk about that unit, that is the unit that is currently at the warehouse. So of course, a part of that is making sure we are in adequate space.
Well, on that warehouse situation, Ms. Evans, it was, what was the condition in the 2020 election? Were you without ventilation? Did you have to bring in Potter Johns?
Yes, we did. And I will,
Okay.
the 2020 election.
Okay, so how did it come about that a decision was made to utilize that space for receiving the mail ballots? Was it because of COVID, or what? Help me understand how we got to this point.
Yes, and that had a lot to do with it. Of course, we had essentially planned the 2020 election when COVID hit. And so, we show up to work and we had to reimagine the entire primary. And of course, the guidance we were getting from the CDC at the time was, not only do you need to wear masks and gloves, but you need to be socially distant. And the recommendations at that time were 6 feet apart. And so we were looking for a facility where everybody could essentially be placed at a 6-foot table. And then looking at the number of people we had trying to process absentee ballots at the time, trying to make sure we were acquiring equipment that would allow us to do things differently. The warehouse was the only location that gave us the square footage to allow people to be socially distant. So that was a huge part of that decision-making process. Also,
Okay, do you customarily talk with DGS about your space needs? I'm assuming so.
yes.
Okay, and if I recall, in 2020, the portion of the convention center was arranged in the event we needed to use it, with multiple beds, thousands of beds, in the event we really, as a city, had to deal with our hospitals becoming filled, et cetera, et cetera. And so when I think about the convention center, it's certainly our largest piece of real estate. I just wonder if thought had been given maybe there is space in that facility, because there were no conventions going on that we could have utilized. Just wondered if that had been considered.
Honestly, in all due respect, I wasn't in the seat in 2020, so I can't speak, definitively whether or not a conversation was had about the convention center, but I can ask the question.
Okay, and what about in 2022? You were in the seat then, right?
We did not have a conversation with the convention center in 2022.
But the conditions at the warehouse were the same.
Correct.
All right, but you did indicate in the budget the need for repairs to the facility, correct?
Correct.
And was that a part of your budget? Did
We
you,
did an enhancement request for,
okay, did the enhancement request go through?
it was not funded.
It was not funded. All right, thank you very much. Thank you very, very much for your testimony today, and we'll continue, and we of course will have so-called offline discussions. Ms. Evans, and thank you and your staff for participating today.
Yes, and thank you for your
Thank you.
support, and I will get the additional information to you. And of course, any questions that you may have, we'll be happy to address those as well.
Thank you very much. Now we will hear from our second government witness, Ms. Collier Montgomery, and I will swear you in. And thank you for your patience. I know we've taken a little time. Okay, if you raise your right hand. Do you swear and affirm that your testimony and any statements that are made before me today to be truthful and complete?
I do.
Thank you. And please proceed when you're ready.
Okay, I'm ready. Good
All
morning, Chairperson Bond. I guess I should say, I'm sorry. Good afternoon, Chairperson Bond, and members of the Committee on Executive Administration and Labor. I'm Cecily Montgomery, Director of the Office of Campaign Finance. Appearing with me today are William Sanford, the General Counsel for the agency, Eric Jackson, who's in my office and is the Fair Elections Program Manager, Wesley Williams, who is the Operations and Policy Officer, Renee Coleman, who is the Manager of the Traditional Campaign Finance Program, and Dolores Ramsey, who is the Training Officer. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today on the Fair Elections Program. As you know, the Fair Elections Amendment Act of 2018 dramatically changed the mode of financing campaign operations in the District of Columbia by offering candidates for local elective office, except for candidates for the office of member of an advisory neighborhood commission, the opportunity to qualify for the public funding of their campaign operation through the combination of matching funds and lump sum base amounts. The Fair Elections Program is a voluntary program, and candidates who seek to participate in the program must pledge to accept lower contribution limits, restrictions on the sources of contribution, distinct expenditure prohibitions, and to participate in at least one debate if in contested citywide races. The certification of candidates into the Fair Elections Program provides the financial ability and impetus for those individuals who may not have otherwise considered elective office to compete in the electoral process, while also amplifying the voice of the qualified small dollar individual district resident contributor whose contribution is matched. The program frees candidates from the rigors of fundraising and promotes meaningful public engagement with the candidate's constituents. The Fair Election Act establishes the program within the Office of Campaign Finance and charges the agency with the responsibility to administer the laws and regulations governing the program, to promulgate procedures to govern the audit and verification of qualified small dollar contributions for compliance with the requirements of the program, to certify qualified candidates into the program and authorize the payment of a base amount and matching payments from the Fair Elections Fund, to oversee the remission of funds and to review and evaluate the program following each election cycle. The Fair Elections Fund is a special non-lapsing fund created for use solely for the distribution of payments to candidates who qualify to participate in the program and for the administrative cost of the program. The regulation of the financial operation of those candidates who do not elect to participate in the program remains subject to the existing reporting requirements of the Campaign Finance Act. The office successfully implemented the Fair Elections Program during the 2020 election cycle and the 2020 special election cycle. The agency certified 20 candidates as participating candidates in the program for the November 20th general election, 12 candidates in the June 20th 2020 primary election, and 4 candidates in the June 2020 special election. The first candidate registered in the Fair Elections Program on April the 7th, 2019. The office completed and launched the first phase of the development of the FEP e-filing and disclosure system for public use on July 26, 2019. Phase 1 enabled the online submission at the OCF website of financial reports and the upload of supporting documentation by candidates registered in the program, as well as the real-time imaging of the reports for public view by district residents. All candidates who registered in the program successfully filed their financial reports online at the OCF website on July 31st, 2019, which was the first filing deadline for the program. The development and design of the second phase of the FEP e-filing system was completed during fiscal year 2020 and focused on providing greater public disclosure of campaign-related data. Overall, phase 2 enabled the public at the website to sort, search, and retrieve contribution and expenditure data, and to view registration disclosures, financial report data, quick statistics, and payout information. In September 2020, the Office of Campaign Finance, notwithstanding the challenges of the COVID-19 pandemic, successfully hosted the first debates under the Fair Elections Act to provide district residents with the opportunity to hear directly from the candidates in the November 2020 general election for the office of at-large member of the Board of Education and at-large member of the council. American Sign Language and Spanish language interpreters were provided for all scheduled virtual 2020 DC debates. Advertisements for the debates were placed on bus exteriors on various routes throughout the district area and on area radio stations. Digital ads were placed on the internet, and debate press releases and candidate information was posted on the OCF 2020 DC debates website. There were 14 community-based nonpartisan organizations which served as partners affiliated with the debates and helped to promote the debates on their social and media channels. All FEP candidates certified in the citywide contest were required to participate in the debates, and all candidates who achieved ballot access in the traditional campaign finance program were invited to participate. The videos of the 2020 debates remained available at the OCF 2020 DC debates website for viewing through the November 2020 general election. The Board of Elections certified FEP candidates as winners in 7 of the 11 seats for covered offices available for election in the November 3rd, 2020 general election. Overall, the agency authorized the total sum of $16,797.64 for disbursement from the Fair Elections Fund in base amount and matching payments to the 36 candidates who were certified in the program to participate during the 2020 election cycle. The 2022 election cycle. The 2022 election cycle was the second election cycle during which the office administered the Fair Elections Program. 52 candidates registered to participate, and 42 of these candidates met the threshold requirements for the covered office sought and were certified as participating candidates in the program in the November 2022 general election and in the June 22 primary election. Ultimately, 37 of the FEP certified candidates qualified for ballot access through the nominating petition process in the primary and general elections. By comparison, 20 candidates registered in the traditional campaign finance program and qualified for ballot access in the primary and general election. Of significance, during the second cycle of the program's implementation, the FEP candidates were elected and certified by the Board of Elections on November the 30th, 2022, as winners in 10 of the 13 seats for public office elected in the November 2022 general election. The agency authorized the disbursement of the total sum of $13,557,106.70 from the Elections Fund and base amount and matching payments to the 42 certified FEP candidates. To date, the total sum of $686,433.82 has been remitted for deposit in the fund from the campaign operations of the candidates who were certified in the program during the 2022 election cycle. In addition, once again, the office successfully advertised, scheduled, and hosted the 2022 debates for the 2022 primary and general election. Advertisements for both the primary and general election debates were placed on bus exteriors on various routes throughout the DC area and on live boards and mobile ads at several WMATA stations, on radio stations, local commercials, community print media, web ads, and print ads, and on small message service text messages to registered voters and social media ads. There were 7 partners, community-based nonpartisan organizations who were affiliated with the 2022 DC debates and promoted the debates on their social media channels. The debates, again, for both the primary and general elections were presented in a virtual format and live streamed at the OCF 2022 debates website, where the recordings and transcripts of the debates remained available for viewing through the November 2022 general election. To date, the Fair Elections Program Division has issued final audit reports of the campaign operations of 18 candidates who were certified to participate in the program during the 2020 election cycle, and 3 candidates who were certified to participate in the 2022 election cycle. The 2024 election cycle, the office has developed and posted at the OCF website fact sheets, brochures, and other training materials for the 2024 election cycle in both the traditional campaign finance and fair election program. To ensure the continuous flow of information about the 2024 election cycle and the campaign finance laws, the agency will conduct mandatory training conferences for the treasurers and candidates registered to participate during the 2024 election cycle, one-on-one consultations with the candidates and treasurers following the filing of the first financial report, and public training seminars, and will also engage in community outreach programs. The agency contacted the advisory neighborhood chairs in December of 2022 to advise of the availability of the agency to present information on the OCF program during the ANC constituent meeting. In May 2023, the agency shared information on the traditional campaign finance and fair elections programs at the meetings of ANC 8A, ANC 6E, ANC 7D, and ANC 3F. The agency is also scheduled to participate once again in the Beat the Streets 2023 program of the Metropolitan Police Department at 10 events scheduled in wards 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8 during July and August of 2023, where the OCF will distribute information on this program. The covered offices scheduled for election during the 2024 election cycle are the offices of at-large 2 seats and Ward 2, 4, 7, and 8 members of the council, and at-large 1 seat and Ward 2, 4, 7, and 8 members of the State Board of Education. The agency formulated cost projections for the covered offices to be elected in December 2022 for inclusion in the fiscal year 2024 a budget proposal for the agency. The total estimate of the funds required for the elections fund to fully support the 2024 election cycle is $9,808,869, which includes $1,230,000 for base amount payment and $8,578,869 for matching payments. The 2024 election cycle will cross fiscal years 2023, 2024, and 2025. And to ensure the availability of public funds during this time frame, the OCF recommended the allocation of the sum of $9,808,869 during these fiscal years based on the activity anticipated in each fiscal year as follows. The sum of $1,667,508, which is 17% in fiscal year 2023. The sum of $7,160,474, which is 73% in fiscal year 2024, and the sum of $980,887, which represents 10% in fiscal year 2025. The sum of $3 million based on the cost projections for the 2020 election cycle was included in the OCF approved fiscal year 2023 budget. To date, in fiscal year 2023, the OCF has authorized the disbursement of expenditures in the amount of $351,024.50 for the candidates in the 2022 election cycle and $76,244.40 to the candidates certified to participate in the 2024 election cycle. The fiscal year 2024 approved budget for the office includes the total sum of $4,271,000 for the Fair Elections Fund. The enhancement of $4 million, which was requested by the agency to meet the anticipated costs of the 2024 election cycle during fiscal year 2024, was not funded. Notwithstanding, the Elections Fund is a non-lapsing fund, and if the balance at the end of the fiscal year is allowed to roll over undisturbed, the fund will be adequate to support the fiscal year 2024 costs. The Elections Fund balance to date in fiscal year 2023 is $10,992,708.75. The balance includes the carryover amount of $8,214,526.28 from fiscal year 2022 and is more than adequate to cover any costs incurred in this fiscal year related to the 2022 and the 2024 election cycles. The July 31st report, which is due on July 31st, 2023, is the remaining required financial report due in this fiscal year by candidates active in the 2024 election cycle, which may require payouts from the Elections Fund. As of this date in fiscal year 2023, only 2 candidates have registered in the Fair Elections Program to participate in the June 2024 primary election. And one of these candidates has met the threshold requirements of the program and was certified on March the 23rd, 2023 as a participating candidate. The covered contractor provision. The fiscal year 2022 Budget Support Act of 2021 funded the covered contractor provision and delayed the applicability of the provisions to any contract entered into or executed before November the 9th, 2022, to allow the Office of Campaign Finance and the Office of Contracting and Procurement to operationalize the covered contractor provisions before applicable. Briefly, the covered contractor provision will prohibit government contracting authorities from entering or approving contracts with an estimated value of $250,000 or more with covered contractors who have made contributions to prohibit recipients as defined by the Act within prescribed timeframe, and will prohibit the covered contractor from making the contributions during the prohibited period. The Act in the first instance mandates each contracting authority to require covered contractors to report their principals, to maintain a publicly available list on its website of all covered contractors, including their principals, for the contracts of that contracting authority, and to notify covered contractors in the solicitation process of the prohibited recipient. The Office of Campaign Finance will be required to work with the district contracting authorities to ensure compliance with the covered contractor provision through the inclusion of training to address the covered contractor provisions in the mandatory entrance conferences for new candidates, treasurers, the cross-reference of the list of covered contractors maintained by the contracting authorities against the financial reports submitted to the OCF on each filing deadline to identify the receipt of potential unlawful contribution, and the notification to the affected covered contractor, the prohibited recipient, and the contract authority of any alleged infraction. The ability of the OCF to identify unlawful contribution is dependent upon the enhancement of the district procurement doing business database to capture the data listing the covered contractors and their principals, the prohibit recipients for contracts based on the estimated value, and the respective prohibited periods as defined by the Act. The OCF has been engaged in ongoing discussions and bi-weekly meetings throughout this fiscal year with the Office of Contracting and Procurement and the Office of the Chief Technology Officer concerning the development and build of the system to implement the covered contractor provision. The OCP has revised the application of the potential covered contractor to require the listing of its principals. The OCTO is currently determining the readiness of the OCP's self-certification portal. Once it is determined that the portal can be moved to production, the copying of data from OCP's SQL server will commence. When the copying of data is complete, the necessary upgrades to the OCF e-filing system will proceed to allow the two systems, OCF and OCP, to communicate and identify businesses and/or its principals who may be in possible violation of the recently enacted covered contractor provisions of the Campaign Finance Act. This concludes my testimony.
Ms. Montgomery, thank you so very much for that very thorough testimony. And I think if everyone was following along, which I certainly hope they were, they are clear as to how the Fair Elections Program works, and then the Covenant Contractor Program is expected to operate. So thank you very much for that. You have also answered my immediate questions about the number of candidates that have signed up for the Fair Elections Program thus far. And I believe your testimony was 2, I believe, thus far.
Yes, that's correct. We have 2 candidates who have registered either seeking certification in the program or in fact have been certified. 1 candidate has been certified.
All right, 1 has been certified. All right. And you've answered my questions about the amount of money that was paid out in 2020 and 2022 thus far. So thank you for that.
You know, I would also, because I think that in the emails that went back and forth, that you were also may be interested in what the threshold requirements may be for the candidates who want to participate in the program during the 2024 election cycle. So I am prepared to provide those, as well as the dates of the qualifying period for the 2024 election as well.
All right, would you provide that for us for the record now?
Yes, I will. Okay, so to be certified as a participating candidate, the candidate for the office of at-large council member must submit qualified or collect qualified small dollar contributions from at least 250 small dollar contributors, which in the aggregate total at a minimum $12,000. And the small dollar contribution must be, in order to be matched, from individual residents of the District of Columbia. For a candidate for ward council seat and the at-large State Board of Education seat, qualified small dollar contributions must be collected from at least 150 small dollar contributors, which in the aggregate total at a minimum $5,000 or more. For a candidate for a ward State Board of Education seat, the candidate must collect qualified small dollar contributions from at least 50 small dollar contributors, which in the aggregate must total $1,000 at a minimum or more. And again, these small dollar contributions, in order to be qualified, must be from individual residents of the District of Columbia. The qualifying period for the 2024 election cycle ends on March 6th, 2024, and that's for the primary election, which is the last day to follow nominating petition as a candidate for an office sought for a covered office sought in the primary election. And the qualifying period for the candidates who seek to participate in the general election is August the 7th, 2024, which is the last day to file nominating petitions as a candidate for a covered office in the general election. And the qualifying period, the deadline, is the date by which the candidate must submit the threshold requirements in order to be certified as a participating candidate in the Fair Elections program. And I also would mention that candidates are required to submit at the time of the submission of the threshold requirements, an affidavit as well, which is signed by the candidate and the treasurer, which indicates that they will follow the requirements and comply with the requirements of the program.
Okay, and Ms. Montgomery, everyone can get this information by going to your website, is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. We have fact sheets which are posted for the Fair Elections program for the 2024 election cycle, as well as our, rules and regulations, which also address the Fair Elections program. And we have general information brochures on the program as well. And of course, members of the public are always invited to communicate with us either by email or by calling the office as well for information.
So can you outline for us what you consider some of the challenges that you will be facing in the 2024 election cycle?
Some of the challenges that we will be facing in the 2024 election cycle?
Yes.
Okay, so also we will be required during the 2024 election cycle to again schedule and conduct debates. So we will be be required to advertise for the debates, as well as again, host the debates. That's one aspect of what we will be doing during the 2024 election cycle. Again, also with the certification of candidates, what's involved in that process is once a candidate submits the threshold requirements, of course, we then have 10 business days within which to verify the qualified, in which to verify the contributions which have been collected to ensure that they do represent contributions from qualified qualified small dollar contributors. And then we're required within 3 days of that to submit an authorization for disbursement to the CFO's office, who then processes and disperses the amounts that have been approved for the candidate once the candidate is certified. After that time, with the reports that are filed, we have 5 business days within which to process the contributions that are collected thereafter, in which to conduct the verification process. The process is fast moving in the Fair Elections Program because we have probably no less than, I would say, during probably the year of the primary, and that would be fiscal year 24, probably no less than 10 or more optional and mandatory filing dates during which we will be processing financial reports for payouts. So those are some of the challenges with the program. Again, we will be scheduling mandatory training conferences for the candidates and treasurers who register to participate in this program, as well as in our traditional campaign finance program. In both of our programs, the auditors, following the filing of the first report, as I stated in my testimony, conduct one-on-one consultations with the treasurers and the candidates so that they can get a good understanding of what was found to present issues in the first report, so that there can be a discussion, so that there will be an understanding of the reporting requirements, so that going forward they will continue to be successful. And I would ask Mr. Jackson, since he's in my office, basically whether there's anything he would like to add in terms of any of the challenges presented. Again, I think the challenge is just making sure that we are able to review the reports within the required time frame in order to make sure that the candidates will have access to the amounts that are approved for disbursement.
Yeah, and I would just add that the only other challenge that we have is the initial payout. Making sure that the candidate is registered with the Office of Procurement and Contracts. They have to register as a vendor, and once they're registered as a vendor, is usually no delays in getting the payments out to them. But that initial payment, when they actually register as a candidate, we actually send them to OCP to make sure that they are registered as a vendor. And sometimes that can offer a little bit of a challenge.
Well, thank you very much. I think really and truly, if you could just sort of walk people through that, I guess, filing or registration process that must be done with the Office of Campaign, with the Office of Contracts and Procurement, because a number of folk have spoken to me about that, and they're like, why do I register as a vendor? I'm not receiving, I'm not putting forth or contracting for a service. So if you could explain that a little more, I think it would be helpful to anyone in the public who's listening.
Okay, so I will defer to Mr. Jackson's, but one thing I would state is that the candidates are required to file the ACH form because that basically puts them into the system so that they can electronically receive their payments. And that's why it's couched in terms of a vendor, but it's actually so that they can receive their payments electronically, which are dispersed from the fund.
Yeah, and that's pretty much it. There's a system that we have no control over, but we try to provide as much information as possible to them that any person or entity that's getting paid through the district government must first go through OCP as a vendor. Although they're not a vendor, but I think that's the label that OCP gave each candidate's committee, so that they could get electronic payment through their bank, directly through their bank, instead of a check or something like that. So it's easy to follow, it's easy to manage, and I believe it's mandated that it's electronic payment.
And then once they file the form, then thereafter, all of their payments are automatically deposited into the committee accounts without any problem. But that is a requirement in order for them to receive their payments electronically into the committee bank accounts.
All right, let's see, anything else we need to add? I think we've done. Your testimony was too thorough, Ms. Montgomery. We got too many answers in there all to our planned questions, but thank you very, very much for today. And we'll come back to you as we get closer to 2024, perhaps maybe in November, to just make sure we're moving along. And thank you and the system for being wise enough to make sure that we would have the remittance that would be necessary or that we think we'll need. Now, there may be many more candidates than we can ever imagine, particularly for those who were listening today and they discover I am a non-citizen and now I can maybe run for something. So I'm just saying, watch out. We may end up with the floodgates opened and we may need to come up with more resources, and we'll do everything we can to make sure that the program is successful.
And I appreciate that. And if I could I just would like to point out one thing, and I would like to point out for members of the public that on our website, we do have a fair elections dashboard, and that what you will find on that dashboard, you will find the fair elections program statistics by election cycle. It will give you the number of registered candidates, the number of certified candidates, what the total payouts have been, the remission. It will give you the numbers by office that were elected in a cycle, and the number of DC supporters, the breakdown of the contributions by non-resident and resident, the amount of total expenditures as well as public funds received. And then we have separate reports on contributions and receipts, as well as, again, the fair elections candidates payment information, which will give you the payout information for all of the candidates, and whether it's a base amount, a matching cap, and will also give you the office sought, the certification status, total payouts. And then we again have as well expenditure reports, which will list all of the expenditures which have been made by the various committees as well. So all of those reports are available at our website. I would point out they're also available for public view with respect to our traditional campaign finance program as well, so that the public can be informed of what is going on in all of our programs.
All right, well, thank you very much for that. So we will close today's roundtable. I want to thank everyone who participated in the roundtable for their contributions. I'm glad we had this opportunity to discuss our preparations for the 2024 election cycle. And I look forward to continuing this dialogue throughout the next months coming. If the public has any additional thoughts or would like to submit written testimony regarding the performance of these agencies, please email it to CEAL@dccouncil.gov. That's CEAL, and it will be included in the hearing record. The hearing record will close on Thursday, July the 6th, 2023 at 5 p.m. The next meeting of the Committee on Executive Administration and Labor will be a public hearing on Wednesday, the 28th of June, beginning at 10. We will hear testimony about 3 bills related to wage and benefits. This concludes today's hearing. And again, thanks to our witnesses. The time is now 1:35 p.m. on June 26, 2023, and the meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.